Dead to the Last Drop, which is the 8th book in the Killer Coffee series. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. I like nothing better than the smell of freshly made coffee that's brewed in the industrial coffee makers. The rich scent of my very own Peruvian roast curled around me like a warm blanket, and Pepper lay at my feet, warming them with his body. Who knew how much a sweet schnauzer could warm not only my feet, but my heart? I reached down and patted him on his sleepy head, but he didn't move. The fireplace glowed with an orange flame and heated the bean hive to a perfect temperature for the customers who had arrived when we opened. The coffee makers beeped to let me know the coffee had been fully brewed, sounding like a wonderful melody. The sound was music to my ears and a signal to get up off the couch and put the breakfast treats in the oven so they'd be hot, fresh, and ready for anyone who needed a little sweets with their morning coffee. Pepper lifted his head to see what I was doing. I better get those in the oven, I told him. It's still coming down pretty good out there. The entire front of the bean hive consisted of windows with a long countertop bar in front of them. Behind the long bar stood stools for customers who wanted to enjoy their coffee while taking in the magnificent view of Lake Honey Springs, the actual reason why Honey Springs, Kentucky was a tourist town. Even in the winter. So pretty, I said with a big sigh as I looked out the freshly fallen snow down the pier and across the boardwalk. Then I turned to head back toward the kitchen to my coffee shop. Bunny Bowowski, my one full-time employee, would be here soon. We took turns opening, and today was my day, which I didn't mind. I'd left my husband Patrick and our poodle Sassy at home and fast asleep, tucked into a warm bed. After I went to Pet Palace, our local no-kill shelter version of the SPCA, Pepper had adopted me as his human, and Sassy and Patrick came along later. That reminded me to keep my ears peeled for Louise Carlton, the owner of the Pet Palace. She said she had a new cat for me to showcase at the Bean Hive this week. I had gone through a lot of hoops to get the health department to even agree to let me showcase an animal from Pet Palace. Everyone deserved a loving home, and having an animal that needed a home here during the week was a perfect way for people to see how the animal acted and how they might fit together with the animal. I was proud to have been able to help all the animals I had at the coffee shop. They were all adopted out and living their best lives. Louise had already told me about a little sweet feline, so I was excited to get her into the shop to give her some good loving. It was still a little too early for Louise to show up, but you never knew whether someone was going to be early or not, and I certainly didn't want her waiting outside in the snow with the cat. I dragged the coat rack sitting next to the counter and used the rack to prop open the swinging door connected to my coffee shop and the kitchen, just so I could hear if anyone was knocking. The beehive opened at 6 a.m. during the week and a little later on the weekends. There wasn't any exact time I opened, but 6 a.m. was when I got up and moved around. During the winter months, I didn't open on Sundays, but I did come in order and prepare the food for the upcoming week. We were technically a coffee shop, but I like to make everyone feel welcome and at home. Coffee was great for that, but a little something for the belly was also good. Each week on the menu, I had a breakfast item outside of the usual donuts, scones, and muffins. I provided something like a quiche or a breakfast-type casserole with a little more oomph for the hungrier customers. I offered a light lunch as well. These food items were the exact same for the week, so I made them in bulk on Sundays. The kitchen had a big workstation in the middle where I could mix, stir, add, cut, or do whatever I needed to do to get all those recipes made. Someone might look at it and call it a big kitchen island, but it was where all the magic happened. There was a huge walk-in freezer as well as a big refrigerator. I had several shelving units that held all the dry ingredients and a big pantry that stored many of the bags of coffee beans I'd order from all over the world. I like to roast my own beans and make my own combinations, but the coffee shop had pretty much reached its capacity of what I could roast, and the small roaster I was in much need of a bigger one upgrade. However, I rented space from my Aunt Maxine, and there was no room to expand on the boardwalk where we were located. On my right was Queen for the Day Spa, and to the left of me was Knick-Knack, a little boutique store with a variety of items. Aunt Maxie didn't own those, so expanding was pretty much out of the question because they weren't going anywhere anytime soon. Quickly, I put the muffin tins in the oven to get them heated up and ready to put in the glass display counter. Then I grabbed the dry ingredients needed to make the coffee souffles, which would sell out fast. Every time I made it, it was a hit. Of course, it was amazing. Who didn't like sugar, vanilla, and coffee? 1 envelope of unflavored gelatin, sugar, salt, and vanilla, I said to myself, plucking the items off the shelf as I found them. Now for a little brewed coffee. I grabbed the carafe out of the small coffee pot I kept in the kitchen for me and put it on the workstation with the dry ingredients. Then I went to the refrigerator to grab the milk and the eggs. Eggs didn't really need to be refrigerated, but for some reason I refrigerated them. Everything in the coffee shop was prepared with the freshest of ingredients. If I could get it locally, I did. My honey came from the bee farm across the lake from the boardwalk. The vegetables and eggs came from Hill's Orchard, and the coffee beans came from all over the world. Hi do! From the coffee shop, I heard a familiar greeting from my Aunt Maxie. It's me, Maxie, she called out like I didn't recognize her voice. But I knew she did it to let me know that she wasn't some random burglar. Aunt Maxie owned the building where my coffee shop was located, and she had a key, and she showed up whenever she wanted. Back here, I hollered back as I just finished pouring the souffle into the serving dishes and putting them into the chiller to set. I had already made some earlier this morning, so I took those out of the chiller and pleased with how they had turned out. Ooh, coffee souffle today? Aunt Maxie walked into the kitchen. She wore a bright red wool coat with purple big buttons. Yes, I couldn't stop from smiling when I saw her. She also wore a pair of snow boots with her polyester brown pants tucked in. She tugged off her purple knit cap that matched the color of her hair. What? She used the tips of her fingers to lift her already high hair in place. Your hair. I don't think I've ever seen it that purple. I walked over and kissed her. Honey, it's a new year, new me. She unbuttoned her coat and hung it up on the coat rack and continued to prop the kitchen door open. Her patchwork hobo bag hung across her body. She dug down deep in it to retrieve a big can of hairspray. Seriously? I asked. My food, I reminded her, but it didn't stop her from spraying. I've got an image to keep up now that I'm in the new play. And that was why she was here. Play? I took the bait to hear all about her new adventure. Aunt Maxie was always getting into something. I always enjoyed hearing about them, even if not all of them had come to be. She was the reason I moved to Honey Springs after my divorce. Aunt Maxie had always lived here, and when I was a little girl, my father would come to visit, bringing me with him. I loved being here so much, I even started to spend my summers here. It wasn't until I'd gone off to college, earned my law degree, gotten married to another lawyer, and opened up a law firm that my spouse and I realized our client policy was to help our clients, all our clients, in more than just law. Well, that was when I found my now ex-husband Kirk doing counseling when it was a little more than verbal, if you know what I mean. It was then that I ran off into the arms of my aunt, who just so happened to have this space open while Honey Spring was in a desperate need for a coffee shop. I was still a lawyer and I kept up my license, a good thing too, because I've given out so much advice around here that I found it soothed my lawyer side. But coffee was my passion. I loved all things surrounding coffee, and gathering with friends for a little gossip just might be my favorite thing of all. Gossip happened all day around the beehive, so technically working here didn't feel like work to me. Didn't you notice the new dowel rod flags on the lights around town? She asked. Aunt Maxie was referring to the dowel rods of the carriage lights that were all over Honey Springs and the boardwalk. Every season or occasion, the beautification committee had special flags to hang on the rods. It was a special touch to add to our small southern lake town. Well, I want you to know that Bunny Bowowski didn't vote for them again. And neither did Maybelle Donovan, she shrugged and curled her nose in disgust. Loretta Beebe is the producer of this year's local theater. Aunt Maxie didn't have to say any more than that. I knew this conversation would need a cup of coffee. Grab those muffins and the stack of cookies, I told her. Grab the souffles and the serving tray of mini breakfast quiches that I made. The pastries were all ready to go in the display case. While we fill the display case, you can tell me all about it. When both of us went through the door, I put down the items in my hand and moved the coat rack. Turning back around, I looked to the inside of the coffee shop. I gasped at the beauty of the coffee shop. I'll tell you after I go to the bathroom, Aunt Maxie headed there. And even though Aunt Maxie owned the building, she didn't give me a cut in rent. I didn't expect her to since it was part of her income. Rent was a little steep, but I'd watched a few DIY videos on YouTube to figure out how to make the necessary repairs for the inspection when I first decided to open the coffee shop. I couldn't have been more pleased with the shiplap walls, which I created myself out of plywood and painted white so it would take on a real shiplap. Instead of investing in a fancy menu or even menu board that attached to the wall, I'd brought 4 large chalkboards and hung down from the ceiling over the L-shaped glass countertop. The first chalkboard menu hung over the pie counter and listed pies and cookies and their prices. The second menu hung over the torts and the quiches. The third menu over the L-shaped counter curved listed the breakfast casserole and drinks. And above the counter, the chalkboard listed lunch options, including soups as well as catering information. On the side of the counter was the drink stand. On each side of the counter was a drink stand. One was a coffee bar with 6 industrial thermoses with different blends of my specialty coffee, as well as the one filled with a decaffeinated blend. And even though I never clearly understood the concept of that, but Aunt Maxie made sure I understood that some people only drank the unleaded stuff. The coffee bar had everything you needed to take a coffee with you and an honor system that let you pay and go. The drink bar on the opposite side end of the counter was a tea bar. Hot tea, cold tea, any kind of tea. There was a nice selection of gourmet teas, loose leaf teas, along with cold teas. I'd even gotten a few antique teapots from the Wild and Whimsy Antique Shop, which happened to be the first shop on the boardwalk. If a customer came in and wanted a pot of hot tea, I could fix it for them, or they could fix their own to their taste. A few cafe tables dotted the inside, as did 2 long tables that had stools butted up to them on each side of the front door. It was a perfect spot to sit, enjoy the beautiful Lake Honey Springs, and sip on your favorite beverage. It was actually my favorite spot, and today would be a gorgeous view of the frozen lake with all the fresh snow lying on top of it. Brr, it's cold! Bunny Bowowski walked through the door, flipping the sign to open. Me and Floyd enjoyed your souffle so much last night. She loved talking about her new relationship with Floyd. Bunny's little brown coat had great big buttons on the front, and her pillbox hat matched it perfectly. The brown pocketbook hung from the crease of her arm, and she swung back and forth as she made her way back to the coffee bar. There, she'd grab a coffee before she hung up her coat and put on her apron. Did you notice the new flagpost flags? She asked and waddled back over to the coat tree. Slowly she unbuttoned her coat and hung her purse and her coat on the coat tree. The sounds of water running in the bathroom caught her attention. What's that? Aunt Maxie is here, so maybe you shouldn't talk about the flags, I suggested, since we were probably talking about the same thing and clearly on the opposite side of whatever it was they spoke of. If it was no big deal to either of them, neither of them would have brought it up. Well, good thing she's here. I'm going to give her a piece of my mind. Bunny brought the mug up to her lips to take a sip. Were you flapping your lips about me? Aunt Maxie stood glaring at Bunny with her fists on her hips. Her purple hair glistened in the light of the coffee shop. What are you doing here so early? Bunny gave Aunt Maxie the once-over. You trying to get to Roxy before me, huh? Listen. We're open, and I don't have time for all of this. I looked between them. Did you see all that snow out there? Bunny asked. It took Floyd almost an hour to get me here. It takes Floyd an hour to get anywhere without snow, Aunt Maxie muttered under her breath, but knew Bunny could hear her. Ladies, I said in my warning tone, though I knew it wasn't going to work. Everyone grab a cup of coffee and let's talk about what's going on. Bunny already had her cup and sat down at the cafe table nearest her. Aunt Maxie sat down at a different table near her. Instead of trying to get them to compromise at a neutral table, I simply let them stay. Grabbed Aunt Maxie and myself a cup of coffee of each and stood so I could address them both. What are the flags about? I asked. Aunt Maxie, who was busy doctoring up her coffee with creamer and sugar, my eyebrow lifted as I wondered why she had even bothered putting coffee in her cup. They are about the play. She lifted her chin in the air and looked down her nose at Bunny. Bunny and Maybelle are mad because they didn't get an offer to be in the play as I did. We don't care one iota about that, Maxine, Buddy chimed in. We want to use the flags we had from last year to promote all of Honey Springs for the winter instead of spending money on new flags when we could use that money elsewhere. Bunny did have a good point, but I didn't dare tell Aunt Maxie that. She'd have a conniption right then and there. It wouldn't be a pretty sight. What good is doing a play for the tourists if they don't know about it? Aunt Maxie snapped back. We could put it in the paper, but tourists don't buy our local paper. We could put it on the flyers in the shop, but look at the snow. Who's going to come out in the snow right now? Then I could see Aunt Maxie's point. Roxanne. When Aunt Maxie said my full name, I knew she truly believed what she was about to say. I'm telling you, when Bunny thought she had a shot at the Lee of Vi Beauregard, she was all over using whatever funds to promote it. Even when the boys at the Moose talking about it had a good Vi she'd be. Why, Bunny gasped, I can't help it if the boys at the Moose like me over you, Maxine Bloom. I guess my niceness trumps your gaudiness. Bunny's eyes drew up and down Aunt Maxie until they fixed right up on Maxie's purple hair. Aunt Maxie looked like one of those pressure cookers. I could feel her anger curling up from her toes and straight up to her hair. I swear I thought her hair stood right up on its own. Why, Bunny Bowowski! Aunt Maxie smacked the table so hard that when she got up, it almost tumbled over. How dare you talk to me like that? Just as I was about to make sure Aunt Maxie wouldn't leap across her table to try to get to Bunny's throat, the bell over the door dinged. Welcome to the beehive! Bunny's disposition turned on a dime. She planted a big smile on her face and stood up just as pleased as a peach, which I was sure because she had gotten in the last word. She and Aunt Maxie knew I wouldn't stand for their bickering while there was a customer. Chapter 1, Dead to the Last Drop. I hope you enjoyed it.